Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Tuesday, February 22nd meeting of the Dunn County Planning, Resource and Development Committee. You can see by my screen that all committee members are present, including our County Board Chair, Dave Bartlett. So we have a quorum. Approval of the minutes from February 8th. Anyone will make a motion for that?
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
Supervisor Morehouse, a second.
Supervisor Bjork will second that.
Thank you, Gary. We have a motion and a second. Any questions or revisions we'd like to talk about? Okay, all in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Minutes are approved. We do have some public comments today. So Tom, do you want to lead us through that?
Sure. So we have a person that would like to speak directly to the committee. And then we also received some written public comments, or one public comment last night. So that one I will start with. I have that up on my screen here. So this was received by email last evening at 9:55 p.m. My name is Sue Citation, and I live at N 5723 70th Street in the town of Elk Mound. I would like to say a few words about the importance of water testing in our county rural areas. Residents are concerned about the quality of our groundwater. There is a lack of information that is easy to access on the importance of and the methods to test our private wells. I have heard from citizens who have had their well tested, but have not heard a report on the wells of their neighbors. I do believe that it would be a good idea to make a request to our county board to apply for the American Rescue Plan funds in order to provide the easy access to testing materials and the education of the public about the importance of testing. We do need a baseline on the status of our county groundwater, and then we can move forward to create a work plan with solutions for any problems we may encounter. Thank you, Sue Citation. So that concludes the written comments that we received. And then Krista received a request from an individual to address the committee this morning.
Yes, her name is Lindsay Ketchel. I believe she is here.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Morning, Lindsay.
Hi, how's it going, Tom? Can you hear me okay? I can put my video off. My internet can be a little shaky.
You're loud and clear.
Oh, okay, great. My name is Lindsay Ketchel, and I live in Otter Creek Township. I actually have the honor of living on Otter Creek. I moved out here about 4 years ago, own about 32 acres of forest, and care tremendously about water, the watersheds, and water quality. I also have a well, a rural well, and I am surrounded by what I would call as fairly large farms. And when I purchased the home, I was a little worried, to be honest with you, about how my water quality might be and how it might affect not only my future health, but the health of the investment that I made in the property that I purchased. I also, and don't hold this against me, I am the executive director of Landmark Conservancy. And so I am deeply and passionately invested in conservation, the environment, and building a powerful model where private citizens can play an important role in some of our most pressing concerns and issues we are facing as a community. Landmarks works within 20 counties, but I am calling as a resident. It was my understanding that a while back, there was an initial groundwater study done in Dunn County to try to identify if we had any concerns or issues related to water quality with groundwater particularly. I'm also concerned with surface water issues in our county. As a result of my concerns, I was very fortunate to hook up with a group that the Dunn Health Right initiated It seems as if I'm not the only resident that's a little concerned about water quality, and became very apparent to me 2 or 3 years ago that there was a group of folks of us who wanted to get together and talk about things that we could do collectively to maybe address some of our water quality issues and concerns. As a result of that done health right, this was surveys done throughout the entire county and given back to our health department. And in those studies, we shouldn't be surprised, but groundwater and water quality is a major concern in issues with residents in this community. And so I'm asking you to strongly consider ways that we can invest in and protect the most important resource we have in this region, which is water. We can't survive without it. Our economies can't survive without it. Our home values are essential to it, and our own personal health. I strongly also would like to suggest, if you would consider, and this is my own personal observation of doing this work, is that government agencies tend to sometimes feel a little overwhelmed if and when they detect an issue or concern. They're looking at their resource base, what they can truly impact within their given work plan and budgets. And when major issues, say like COVID, addresses a community, it can have profound impacts on our capacities. And so I sense that sometimes within Dunn County, there is a limitation in what the government can offer. And so I would strongly suggest that you consider working in collaboration and in a partnership with this community group that has emerged. We're here and we represent, I think there are about 16 other nonprofits who are part of this little group that we're seeding to work in collaboration and assist us in this county in working cooperatively to protect our most important resource, our water. And we're here to be in service to you in any way we can. But I just wanted to take a couple minutes because I think sometimes these issues aren't as aware to all the members in the community. I know you get studies, you hear about polls. But anyway, I just wanted to share that with you, and thank you for taking the time, and sorry if I was a little long and preachy.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. We will appreciate your comments and take them to heart. I think that's all for public comment today. So before we move on to the agenda, I'm going to suggest, just for the interest of getting some folks who have shorter items, allowing them to get on with their day, that we move the staff reports, which will involve some discussion of groundwater, I guess, down to the end of the meeting, and that we move up we start with number A, and then we move up item D and E so that Beata can help us with those and then get back to her regular job, so to speak. Without objection, is that okay with the committee? Okay, then without objection, we'll do that. So we'll move down to 8A. Ms. Fagan, you want to take this? Barbara, you on?
And Chairman
Sorry, I
Quinn.
was having a little difficulty. Thank you. Yes, I am happy to proceed, sir. So we have at this point one property that was open for open bids, and that property is in the Eau Claire, Hiawatha area. It is it has a mobile home on it, and then kind of some outbuildings. There's some septic issues with the property. The county had, the committee had originally set the minimum bid on the property for $95,000. And when it was in the sealed bid stage, that property did not have any bids that were made on that property. We have gotten 2 bids for the property today, and if I can pull that up. So there was a bid from Michael and Christina Haas for $76,200. And then there was a bid from Richard and Eileen Kolb for $45,900. Since submitting our information to Mr. Carlson, we did have another bid come in for $10,000, which obviously is significantly lower. The Kolbs did write a letter that they wanted to be read to the committee. So the Kolbs write, "Dear Dunn County Planning Resources and Development Committee, we have become familiar with the area through friends who own several properties in the area. The beauty and location of the rural area is very attractive to us. Our daughter has lived in the area since her graduation from UW Eau Claire. She has very recently had our second grandchild, and we're looking to become closer to them. Their home is much too small for us to move in with them, even temporarily. Owning a small home close, but not too close, seems like an ideal answer to this situation. At this time, we are not able to sell our home in Green Bay due to Rick's father being alive, 98 years young, and living in Green Bay. Rick is responsible for his day-to-day care. We are able to leave for short periods of time now, but don't know what the future holds. We would be using this property as our cottage until our situation changes. We are both retired, Rick from Route Sales and Eileen from UW System, UW Green Bay and UWO. We have a history of purchasing older properties and restoring them into Pierre, Kewanee, and Green Bay. This property does not intimidate us. The property will be our permanent retirement home. We will not be flipping it or using it as an Airbnb business. Our plans would be to remove the double wide trailer that is present in the near future due to the dilapidated condition. We would rehab the garage physically and aesthetically. The horse barn would be kept rehabbed into a much desired carpenter's workshop for Rick. At this time, we are talking with the Big Sky Trading Post Company from Osseo, Wisconsin, about their small log homes to replace the trailer. We've also been investigating geothermal heating and cooling for the property. We have talked with the original retailer manufacturer, Town and Country, of the double wide trailer, attempting to find a resale value of it. They suggested it was worthless. Due to the lack of maintenance and care of the trailer, it has no value except scrap. We inspected the trailer and it has several major roof leaks, holes through the floor and subfloor. The soffits are rotted, as is the main frame of the trailer. The lower portion of the siding all the way around is rotted. All mechanicals need replacing, and the windows and doors need to be replaced for energy efficiencies. These are the major issues, but there are many smaller issues. We asked if it could be sold, and they suggested that someone might take it for free and remove it for a deer hunting cabin. The cost of removal would be the new owners. If we can't find someone to take it, we would have to demolish it at a cost for permits, labor, transportation, and landfill tipping fees. We were not able to see if the trailer is on a cement slab or if it was on a gravel base, but either way, we would need to remove it and fill in the area. We are not sure about the septic or the well being usable, and the power would have to be restored in order to check these items. The property value on the GCS says that the property value is $12,000, which we believe is too low. We think $20,000. The barn, we believe, should be valued at $15,000 and the garage at $10,000. The double wide trailer is a negative value to the property. If we remove it, our estimate, best guess, being honest, is $10,000 if we have to hire someone to remove it. Whether they have to tear it down or apart, they can pull it away and take it to the landfill. Then there are unknowns that can cost a fortune. This will be a cash purchase. Our bid is $45,900. We're excited to be become part of the Chippewa Valley community. We hope to hear a positive response from your committee. And so the recommendation from my office is to accept the bid from the Haas's of $76,200. Sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Diane.
Ms. Hagan, what is the size of this property, and would you remind us where it is, please?
It's just shy of 1 acre, and it's right on the Dunn County, Eau Claire County border in the Hiawatha neighborhood. So if you go on E, past just behind Amy's church, in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts anyone wants to share?
Question, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Gary.
why, if that house is in such bad shape, why was the appraised value so high?
I can't speak to that. I've been in a number of the in-rem homes, and this particular one is not full of debris or a bunch of belongings. A lot of times people just walk away. I mean, the people that left vacuumed. The floor is sturdy. I respectfully disagree with the Kolb's assessment of the complete disrepair that structure is in. I do think it probably needs some work. The property value, I mean, that neighborhood is a lovely neighborhood. The land itself is very nice. So I'm not quite sure how the appraiser got to the appraised value. It's the appraiser we use for most of our properties. So that came in at $95,000.
But the only thing that troubles me is that right now, the housing and land market is just going sky high. There's some land over in Otter Creek I heard last night that was bought 5 years ago for $1,000 an acre, and now it's sold for $7,000 an acre. And a friend of ours, kid, bought a house in Chippewa County, and there were at open house there were 4 bids that day, and the bids were all like above what the asking price was. So,
Sure. Well, it would be well within the committee's decision making to even reject the $76,000 bid and see what we could potentially get in the future.
Barbara, how long ago was the appraisal done? Do you know?
The appraisal would have been done in July, and then it went for open sale this fall for the sealed bid, and then open bids would have started about a month ago, 6 weeks ago. And so this is our first round of bids.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
This is Mike here. How long have we had it? And how much taxes are owed on it?
The county would have taken possession of it in June of 2021. And there were about $5,000 of taxes owed on it. Taxes were accruing at about $1,700 per year. I have, for the committee's information, frankly, received a number of phone calls on this particular property, but I've only shown the property a few times. Everybody I showed it to had a sense that $95,000 what felt high for the property, whether that's true or not. I can't necessarily speak to that. I'm not an expert in that particular part of the field, but I'm happy to continue showing it and, and see what we get.
Thank you, Barbara. Any other questions? So we have, we can either accept one of these two bids. The recommendation is the higher bid, or we can reject them and keep the property on the market, so to speak. Anyone care to make a motion one way or the other on this?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Diane.
I would move that we approve the bid for $76,200 from Michael and Christina Haas.
Thank you. Is there a second for that motion?
I will second it. This is Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you, Mike. Any further, any discussion of that motion? Okay,
Just one question.
sure. All right.
How long are these bids for? I mean, are they for a month or for just till today? How long are they good for?
Respectfully, I mean, you're kind of in charge of that. I think that you could keep the bids open, and they could take them away, but we could keep the bids open for another month. Once it goes to open bid stage, we take bids on a rolling basis. So basically, if the bids come in time to send them off to Mr. Carlson to get on the agenda, then they come before you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. We heard that the taxes per year was $1,700. Is that correct?
Right.
Thereabouts.
And there's a difference of almost $2,000 of appraised value and the most recent bid. That seems like a lot to me. I'm inclined to think that we should wait at $1,700. That's appraised value certainly appears to me to be correct, but that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? So the motion is to accept the higher bid of 72,200. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no.
Well,
No,
I would oppose it.
Okay, just to be clear, I can't see everybody on the screen, but if you could raise your hands, if you're in favor of the motion, raise your hand. If you're opposed to the motion. The vote is 3-2. The motion passes. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you. I have another issue on the agenda. There was another parcel over so past season's harvest to what I believe is the west. Past season's harvest to the west. The committee in July had set a minimum bid for, or in late summer, set a minimum bid for that parcel at $35,000 based on the appraised value of that property. After it went on the market, we started getting a lot of calls from the neighbors, and Tom Carlson and his staff were nice enough to go out and resurvey the property because it became clear that perhaps our maps on the county level were off. And so that did proved to be true. Greg Batzer went out and had resurveyed it and found some of the lines. And so it was the property was about $40,000 smaller, or 40 feet smaller than we had originally thought. And some of the sheds might be a stretch. Some of the small kind of outbuilding sheds were actually not on the property; they're on adjacent property. And so I wanted to come so we took it off the sealed bid market, and I wanted to come before you to determine what we wanted to set this bid at. Originally, I thought that perhaps then $35,000 was too much, given that it's on that there's buildings on other properties, and that the property is smaller. But as we pointed out with the last issue, property values are going up. So we would be re-entering the sealed bid phase. And so I would propose that we keep the bid at $35,000, but keep an open mind if we get to the open bid stage, that perhaps that valuation might be a little bit high, given the boundaries of the property are smaller now.
Okay, anybody have any questions about that?
Question for Tom Carlson. If those sheds are on a different property, if it's been over 20 years, does that revert to the original property? Adverse possession?
Well, you're getting into legal issues here that I have to tread very, very carefully on. Whether use and occupancy of that shed meets all the 5 elements of adverse possession, it would have to be open, continuous, exclusive, adverse, and notorious for typically a statutory time period of 20 years. But that is not my decision to make. It's a matter of law. And from what I understand, the shed is in a state of disrepair. I wasn't on the property myself, but it's not a very substantial structure from what I'm hearing, that I believe could certainly be moved with very little effort. So to answer your question, Supervisor Bjork, perhaps, but is it worth somebody's time to go through the legal proceedings to gain title to a small area around the shed? And then I guess it would have to be, in the judgment, what is the area? Is it just the shed? Is it a reasonable use around the shed to maintain it? A lot of questions come up. I would say it's not in anybody's best interest to pursue an adverse possession claim on a small shed like this, but that's my opinion. Does that answer your question?
But even on the original property lines, because I've gained land on adverse possession, and I've lost land on adverse possession, not a lot, but like I said, it had to go through the courts. There's lawyers costs in that too, but even the bigger lot size, if it's been there for 20 years and they've like maybe mowed the lawn out there, right there. But like you said, it's not that much of a parcel of land, so maybe it's not even worth considering.
And I'm not seeing any other type, obviously on the other side, if we zoom in, there is an area that's being mowed by the neighbor. So, does that constitute all the elements of adverse possession? I don't know. I'm not going to answer that, but at least there's something substantial, visible you can see. And I get it. The shed is here also, but there is no other indication of use across this line other than that shed. I guess the argument I would make is there's irons in the ground too. This is lot 5 of a certified survey map. So these owners, should have done their due diligence and known where their property corners were. This is a little bit different situation, I would argue, than, somebody's 40-acre parcel that they've had in the family for 100 years. And there's, 135-year-old fences marking it that everybody's used and honored. I don't want to trivialize it and say that it isn't important, but I guess I personally don't know if somebody winning an adverse possession claim or even pushing it on a very small shed. You know, typically it's something larger. Say the home was, 100 feet over the line and they've had a yard and a well and a septic and other improvements associated with it. And honestly, I don't know that it's our responsibility, certainly, to buyer beware, I guess. And if somebody buys this property, they're going to have to deal with the shed issue, either remove it or pursue an adverse possession claim that wouldn't involve us per se.
And I would only add that to be adverse possession, it needs to be, not to be too simple, it needs to be adverse. And in having some limited conversations with some of the neighbors that had called, it sounded like it very well might have been a generally understood sort of situation that they all kind of were willing to overlook some of these property line issues in the moment. So then that wouldn't arguably be adverse either.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, then I think, Barbara, you gave us your plan. It's consistent with what we've done on the property before, so move forward with it.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for bringing the offer to us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So let's move on to the budget carryover and the budget adjustment request, items 8D and E. So we can let Beata get on with her day. Beata, you gonna lead us through this?
I can walk you through it, walk everyone through it, Tom.
All right.
Okay, so the first one here, budget carry forward request for our Land and Water Conservation Division. The majority of everything on here is related to grants. So I can just run down the list here. The first two dollar amounts for $53,382 in response to our state grant for cost share funds. So this would be associated with conservation practices that we cost share for landowners. Due to whether it's weather or contractor availability or other circumstances, we tend to have to extend those into the following year to get those projects completed. So that's what this dollar amount would be for, is to carry forward those funds. The next two lines for $5,392 is also related to cost share. Those are specifically for nutrient management plan funding. So this would be to carry forward funds into 2022 to complete a nutrient management plan for a cost share project. The next would be carry forward funds regarding our snowmobile trail aid grant. The one after that for $113,165 is for a particular project related to snowmobile trails and bridges on 18 Mile Creek. That project was not completed last year due to floodplain requirements in the process there, so we'll need to carry that forward as well. The next dollar amount for $10,691 is for our Red Cedar Conservation Farmers Farmer-Led Watershed Group. This would be carrying forward funds, particularly for that type of activity in that grant, including some educational supplies, which is why it is split out in those next two line items. The next line item for $30,000 is to carry forward grant funds for the Devil's Punch Bowl stairway replacement. So this is in partnership with Landmark Conservancy to replace those stairs to that unique feature on our landscape here in Dunn County. And as a part of that grant we received from Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund, we need to make the payment for that project, and Landmark Conservancy is also contributing to those funds. Therefore, you'll see 50% match is covered by Landmark. So there is no cost directly to the county budget at this time. It's more or less processing that grant to our funds, but we'll need to request an extension or carry forward into next year. The last thing would be related here, or excuse me, the second to last thing for $20,936 is within our budget, is typically levy dollars, and that's related to our Knights Creek watershed structures. There are flood control structures, 3 of them in the county, as well as our Dunn County Island management of that property. This would be carrying forward funds from last year's budget to 2022 to do a required repair on Knights Creek structure, as well as facilitate necessary work for a timber sale, potential timber sale on the Dunn County Islands. And then the last here for $3,761.97 is related to the MDB program, the multi-discharger variance program. We've discussed that in this committee several times before. That is a project where phosphorus reduction requirements for municipalities are transferred to the county to implement conservation practices within the watershed to reduce the phosphorus load into that watershed. And this is carrying forward funds from last year's projects into this year, where we will also discuss a budget adjustment later for additional funds in that program. So if there's any particular questions, I can try to answer them for you right now. Otherwise, this would be our carry forward request for our Land and Water Conservation Division.
Any questions, Mr. Cummings?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Chase, very good. Thank you. A good explanation. These grants, then, there's a lot of them. Do you think they can be completed then this year of 2022? And how long might this, and then a good comment, I think with the Devil's Punch Bowl, I think that was a total of 60,000. Will you be able to complete that stairway this summer? And I ask these questions because some of these will be used for our rural tourism information that we will be providing for next year in the Devil's Punch Bowl, and maybe other things, Chase, that you think are important for people to see and visit when they come to Dunn County. But it's good. I approve this. Thanks, Chase.
Yeah, I can answer those questions, Supervisor Anderson. Real quick, yeah, the majority of these grants we would expect to be completed here in 2022. They are projects that need to be completed specifically related to the Devil's Punch Bowl. That's going to be determined based on our partnership with Landmark Conservancy and the work that they're putting into getting that project off the ground, fundraising, as well as working with a contractor to see that project completed. I believe the hope is to complete that here in 2022, but I would let you know that that grant, the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund grant, does not expire until June of 2023.
Okay.
So there, given the circumstances with weather, contractor availability, and other things, there may be necessary to complete that project yet next year. But the hope is, and the plan is, to have it done this year.
Thank you, Chase.
Any other questions? Could I have a motion to approve the carry forward request?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Anderson, is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
President Morehouse, any further discussion, questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Budget adjustments, Chase.
I can jump ahead and do budget adjustments, or I believe Ann has one carry forward request as well, if you'd like her
Oh,
to
really?
speak on
Okay.
that.
I'm sorry, Ann, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. So I just had a carry forward request. We were doing a scanning project with US Imaging of all our zoning and sanitation files. We had some money set aside for that. The project was not completed in 2021, so we're hoping to get that completed in 2022. So we'll need about the $38,000 to keep that going.
Okay. Any questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
not obviously, and not directly related to the carry forward. How far along is the project? It was started, right?
Yep, it's been started. We're still kind of working out exactly how they are scanning files. We had some difficulty kind of getting them to scan the files separately for sanitary and zoning. Once we get that sorted out, they'll finish the project.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Motion to approve the carry forward.
So moved.
Morehouse moves. Is there a second?
I'm sorry.
I'll second it.
Supervisor Anderson seconds. Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. And I guess we're down to 8E, budget adjustment from Land and Water Conservation. Chase, you want to take that?
You bet. So here you'll see some budget adjustments associated with a number of grants as well. Basically what I can run down the list here. The first one is to be our Mdb program again. So I mentioned that earlier in the carry forward. We are expecting more funds from several municipalities within the Red Cedar watershed for 2022 in the total of $11,000 is the estimate that was given to us. Again, we intend to use those funds within the Red Cedar watershed for a particular buffer program, as well as any other conservation practice we have the latitude to use the funds for to reduce phosphorus. So we'll need to adjust that budget for 2022 by 11,000. The next line item there would be for 16,000. That is for Snowmobile Trail Bridge and Reroute project, known as the White Bridge. That bridge has some floodplain implications, so we'll need to work through some of those, including a hydrologic and hydraulic study for floodplain, which incurs more cost. Therefore, we'll need to request an adjustment for that as well. This is also grant funds through the state, so that it offsets no impact to the county levy. The next one will be 18 Mile Creek Reroute and 2 bridges. So this is a project that was also part of the carry forward request earlier. This is additional funds to process floodplain related issues with those bridges. So that would be for $7,500. The next would be for $28,478. This would be related to the grant we received from Department of Ag, Trade and Consumer Protection and the Department of Natural Resources for staffing for conservation staff in the county. We have long lobbied as a state to increase funding for local land conservation departments, and this is the benefits of that. While it may be perceived as small, it is a win for us to some degree. And as you can see by the red in parentheses line items underneath there, we reduced the expense to the county levy by offsetting it with additional staffing dollars from the state. So that is an adjustment made in those 2 areas. The next would be for $20,000. You'll see that in 4 different spots here. That is again related to Devil's Punch Bowl. So due to a number of circumstances that you can all attest to in the market today, with increased costs for supplies and materials and availability of those supplies and materials, those expenses have gone up. The cost estimate that Landmark Conservancy obtained from a private contractor increased beyond what we had originally anticipated, or they had anticipated. So that is went from a $60,000 project to almost a $100,000 project. So this budget request would add $20,000 to the grant that we'll be applying for, as well as the match dollars coming from Landmark. So there would be basically a $50,000 from the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund, and then $50,000 from Landmark Conservancy. So with that, those are our budget adjustments for 2022. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Cummings? Okay. Thanks, Chase. Motion to approve. Anyone care to make?
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor moves to approve.
I'll second it.
Supervisor Pinero moves, Supervisor Anderson seconds. All in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thanks, everybody. Then we'll go back up to, I think it's where we would be at item 8B, discuss and take action on request to create a new CSM in the town of Sherman. Mr. Carlson, you want to lead us through this?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. So what we have here is a request. It involves a certified survey map in the town of Sherman. So Scott and Anita Sikora are the applicants, and they reside on 410th Street in Menominee. They currently have a home, some outbuildings, a well, and a septic on a parcel of land that measures approximately 33 acres. I'll bring this up here. So here's kind of an aerial view. You can see they're roughly 33-acre parcel. See where the buildings and improvements are situated. Again, we're in the town of Sherman. The property contains no frontage along a public highway. So 410th Street is a town road. It comes in and it dead ends where my hand is here on the screen. So their subject property does not front on that town highway. When the Sikoras purchased the property in November of 2003, a 20-foot wide perpetual access easement was granted to them, which provides access to 410th Street to the west. Several of the other nearby adjoining property owners also have rights to use that access easement. I'm going to bring that up right now. So here is the subject easement where it was recorded here, November of 2003. So here's the property, and then together with a perpetual access easement across, it's described as the north 20 feet of the east, 819.25 feet of the northeast 1/4, the southwest 1/4, section 27. So that is the easement they currently have to access this property. The Sikoras are proposing to parcel off their existing improvements with about 10 acres, which of course requires the preparation of a new certified survey map that needs to comply with our new land division ordinance, chapter 16. On February 10th, I received the 1-lot preliminary CSM, and I will bring that up here. So this is the certified survey map that was presented or submitted to the county for review. So this new lot 1 that's being proposed, of course, is going to be accessed by a 20-foot wide access easement. If I zoom in here, you can see this here. So the lot that's being proposed is going to come in from 410th Street with this 20-foot wide access easement. That easement, of course, doesn't meet the 66-foot width requirement that's spelled out in our new land division ordinance. The section of our ordinance, so we do have another section of the ordinance that provides some guidance on what to do with an existing access easement that doesn't meet our current requirements. And I'll read that section. In part, it reads, existing public or private roads or easements that are proposed to provide access to newly created lots shall meet the requirements of this section. If a road does not meet such requirements, the subdivider shall meet with the town and this committee to determine the suitability of the existing road and determine what conditions, if any, need to be met to provide for adequate access. The Town of Sherman Plan Commission met on February 9th to review this certified survey map. And at the outcome of that meeting, they suggested a note be placed on the final certified survey map, which is right here. And I'll read that to you quickly. It says the Town of Sherman has conditionally approved this division with the stipulation that if the remaining lands of this parent parcel indicated as unplatted lands by owner are ever to be built upon and or improved, then the town road known as 410th Street will need to be extended to the east to accommodate for any future access to these remaining lands. Contact the Town of Sherman for specific details and any questions on permitting and access regulations. So does everybody understand that? The note is saying that the remainder of the land that is going to remain undeveloped at this time, if that is ever to be built upon as, residential type of use on the remaining property, then this town road will have to be extended to accommodate that use. So that note was added at the Town of Sherman Plan Commission. The surveyor placed it on the map. And then the Sherman Town Board actually met on this last Wednesday, and after some discussion, they took action to formally approve the certified survey map. I don't have minutes from that actual meeting, but the chair for the town of Sherman is with us today, Chase Potter, and I will just show you. So this is the second sheet of the certified survey map. So the town signatures are on here. Again, this was from their meeting last Wednesday. So why are we here today? Well, the role of the PR&D committee is not to approve the certified survey map, but rather to determine the suitability of this existing access easement, which is substandard, right? It needs to be 66 feet. It's only 20 feet. So we need to determine, the committee needs to determine what conditions, if any, need to be met in order to provide adequate access to the new lot that's being proposed. County staff have reviewed the proposed CSM, and other than the substandard width access easement, the CSM, we feel, meets all other applicable ordinance requirements that the county has. So in closing, I'd like to remind the committee that this is an action item. You are not approving the actual CSM, but it is an action item that will require a formal motion and a second. And I would say, if you're looking for it, how the motion should be worded to be similar to the following: the existing 20-foot wide access easement serving the proposed lot 1, as indicated on the preliminary certified survey map, either is suitable for the intended purpose or is not suitable for that intended purpose. So that would be the motion, I believe, that we need to entertain in this meeting. So again, we're not approving the CSM, we're just determining the adequacy of this access easement. And also, just a reminder, Mr. Sikora is with us, the applicant, and also, as I had mentioned, Chase Potter is also here and can give some input as far as the town's decision and what they would have discussed last Wednesday. If the commission or if the committee feels input from these two individuals is certainly necessary or would be beneficial. So that concludes my staff report, and I'll turn it back over to you, Tom.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Yeah, I think it would be helpful to hear comments from Mr. Sikora and Mr. Potter. So, Mr. Sikora, if you're on, could you share with us your perspective on this?
Sure. Yeah, I'm definitely on. So the reason we are doing this, so our daughter and her husband are purchasing our current home. The reason we wanted to break it out into roughly 10 acres. My wife and I, Anita, we're downsizing. We're getting to the age where we don't want to manage that size of the property. The two financially can't afford all the property. So what we decided to do was break up a chunk of it. Anita and I are keeping the other chunk with zero intentions to ever sell it or build on it, because Allie and Tanner, daughter, husband, ultimately are going to buy it from us when they get to the financial situation they can afford that. But this allows them to get a loan and purchase the actual dwelling, I'll call it, so that Anita and I then can go do our next step in life. So that's why I was comfortable with the fact that, hey, you can't have a road to or a driveway going in there to build on it, because that is not our intention.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Sikora? All right. Mr. Potter, could you share some thoughts about the board action?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to reiterate what Mr. Carlson said, that the Plan Commission and the town board had some extensive discussions about this. And initially, I think that maybe we had some of the same concerns that are raised by the county subdivision ordinance regarding the access easement to these parcels. Typically, we wouldn't have approved a CSM lot if it were to be a new buildable lot. However, we do understand the uniqueness of the situation, and with the inclusion of our note, which prevents future building on the property or improvements until the town road would be extended, we feel that mitigates any access concerns that might have been proposed, posed by this lot split. And therefore, both the Sherman Plan Commission recommended approval and the town board approved the CSM.
Thank you. Committee members have any questions?
Questions, Mr. Chairman, for the county surveyor? How many parcels would have to use that easement because 410 doesn't go far enough east? Is there quite a few number of parcels?
Sure, that's a good question, Supervisor Bjork. So these three parcels that I'm running let me just zoom in here. These three parcels right here that I'm running my hand across have all been surveyed. And these two front directly on the town road, and the town road, according to the certified survey map, ends right at the west line of this parcel that's, you can see, is owned by Randy Smith. So those lots technically don't use this access easement. We have a parcel down here that has frontage on the road. And granted, the easement crosses this property, but by definition of an easement, you can't have an easement across land you already own. So this lot is not utilizing the access easement. There is a lot here where my hand is that is, certainly using that easement to get to it. It doesn't have frontage on the town road. So we have one lot here. And then while this isn't a surveyed lot of record, but it is an adequate part of a full 40 of the northwest southeast of the section. These people, in checking their deed, they do have an easement across the same strip of land. So right now there'd be at least two other people that are using this. And our ordinance says that once you can serve up to 4 lots with a private access easement. Once you exceed 4, serve more than 4 lots, you will be required per ordinance to build it up to town road standards. So right now we have three individuals, I should say 3 different properties utilizing this access easement.
And how about the southwest of the northeast parcel? I mean, that would also benefit if the road was extended, correct?
It would benefit that parcel right now. It goes off of the map here, but this parcel there's many other parcels that are owned by these individuals. And as you head to the north and east, they do have frontage on a different public highway. So, and I just checked their deed quite quickly last week, and I didn't see any mention in their current deed of rights to use this access easement. Not to say that perhaps they are using it, I don't know, but right now their current deed at least didn't make mention of this access easement. And then, like I had mentioned, they do have property, or they do have access to the property from a different public road on the other side.
Okay, one more question and then a comment. And the comment would be that 20-foot wide, if you plow snow with a bad storm, which you get a couple times a winter usually, you'd be plowing snow on other people's property, which could become a problem. And then maybe I didn't understand you, wasn't paying attention. I thought I was, but that CSM, you cannot build a house on it?
The certified survey map. So let's just back up here. So this is the certified survey map. The CSM they're proposing contains the existing home and all buildings, well, and the septic. They're just simply,
I see. Yep.
They're trying to get the home on a more manageable piece of land for financial reasons. So I guess the way I'm rationalizing this, and I know it's not my decision, but if you're looking for my opinion or how I would rationalize this, the home and all the improvements right now sit on 33 acres. They're using a driveway. That is not going to change. Let's just say the committee determines today that this easement is not acceptable for the intended use. Well, at the end of the day, the house is going to remain, the well, the septic, they're going to continue living there. Somebody's going to live there, and they're going to continue using this access easement. So in my mind, what's the difference if these improvements sit on 10 acres or if they sit on 33 acres? We're not going to make them remove the driveway based on our decision today. So, the committee may not agree with me, but that's how I'm rationalizing it. You know, and if they, I guess I would defer back to the applicant, you know, they could probably provide information on, you know, what happens in the winter. Perhaps the neighbors are all agreeable, they all get along, they may push the snow on the property, but it would just seem to me that if there were some issues, perhaps we would have heard about those by now, or, and perhaps Mr. Sikora can speak to that arrangement they have for plowing snow. I personally don't know, but you do raise some good questions, Supervisor York.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can actually jump in if you would like. As far as the snow removal goes or blowing of the snow, the majority of the easement snow actually goes onto our property because our property parallels the majority of the easement road. So for us, you can kind of tell how it's laid out here. Everything in front of the house down to the easement road is just kind of open land. You know, we don't have any outbuildings on it. So all the snow pretty much goes to the north side of the easement road. And, you know, to Tom's point, you know, good friends with all of our neighbors. Snow removal hasn't been an issue. I actually take care of most of the snow removal myself or even the neighbors. So that has not been an issue.
Any other questions from the committee? So, Tom, you're suggesting our motion deal with the suitability of the existing 20-foot easement only?
Correct. And of course, the committee could decide that they want to approve or deny the certified survey map, and you do have that option as well. But today, I guess I wasn't anticipating that. The CSM technically doesn't need your approval, but you know, the way the ordinance is written, you can approve as a committee any certified survey map that comes through the county. So yes, to answer your question, I guess I'd be looking for a motion on whether or not the proposed or the existing access easement will adequately serve the proposed lot 1 on the certified survey map.
And do we need to take into consideration the note that the town is putting on the map? I mean, should the motion refer to that as an element of whether it's suitable or not?
It certainly could. It wouldn't hurt if the committee feels that note is valid and worth noting, certainly. I can bring that up one more time.
Okay, so I would think we would have possibly, if we want to, and our role in this is, why is our opinion important in this, Tom?
Your opinion is important because if we go back to our new land division ordinance, it says all existing access easements proposed to provide access to newly created lots shall meet the standards of our ordinance. And one of the standards says it needs to be 66. And then a section further on the ordinance says where these existing easements are being proposed to provide access, if they don't meet the requirements, then the subdivider shall, the word is shall, so they're required. So Mr. Sikora is required to meet with the town and the PR&D committee to determine the suitability of the existing road and determine what conditions, if any, need to be met to provide for adequate access. So that's the committee's role in this. Is the existing easement adequate?
All right. So I suggest, I guess, unless someone else wants to make another suggestion, that if we want to find this suitable, we would have a motion that said something like the committee determines that the existing 20-foot access easement with the town of Sherman note on addressing potential future development is suitable. That be one possible motion, Tom?
Sure.
And the other option would be, if we don't think it's suitable, is to say the existing 20-foot easement is not suitable.
Correct.
Is not suitable. Anyone care to make either one of those motions or a different motion, I'm open to it.
Could I ask a question first, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I'd like to ask the town chairman of Sherman, how much are they against to extending that 410th Street?
I can address your question, Commissioner. I wouldn't say that the town is against it, but it's passing. We would have to take land from multiple different landowners. So as far as the feasibility of asking multiple landowners to either grant the land via easement to the town or taking it by eminent domain, I think that either of those are really feasible options. I think what's likely to happen here is that the town road won't be extended for a very long time, if ever, and therefore that these the remaining unplatted lands that bear this note in the town of Sherman are never going to be developed on, I think is the likely outcome of what's happening here. And that's a large part of why we voted to approve it, because we believe that the actual effect on this private easement is that there is no change as a result of this potential approval.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Supervisor Kinnear here. It
Yes.
seems the town of Sherman board did a really good job looking through this. So I'd like to make a motion that we say that this is suitable, given the restriction put on it by the town of Sherman.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a
I'll second that motion.
Supervisor Anderson seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no.
No,
Motion carries. And that's, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us and sharing your information on that. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's move on then to 8C, Idella Ridge preliminary plat.
Okay, I can present my staff report. So this is a preliminary plat review of the Idella Ridge subdivision. The applicant is Bob Rosendahl. He is actually with us today on the Zoom call. The engineering and surveying on the project is being performed by Cedar Corporation. So the project engineer is Kevin Oyam. He's with us as well. And the project surveyor is Dustin LeBlond, I'm sorry, who is also with us. So Mr. Rosendahl, let me bring up the plat here. And this was in your packet. Okay. So Mr. Rosendahl is proposing to develop roughly a 62-acre parcel of land located in the town of Menominee into a 29-lot, mainly residential subdivision. The subject property is located west of 429th Street, about a quarter mile north of US Highway 12. County Trunk Highway BB is located along the northern boundary of the preliminary plat. Lots 1 through 26 will have direct frontage along a proposed 66-foot wide public street. So this public street that's on here, this will be dedicated, built to town road standards and dedicated to the public. So lots 1 through, let me just zoom in here. So lots 1, and they wrap around back to 26. So this northerly tier of lots here are all going to have access off this proposed 66-foot wide public street. Direct vehicular access from lot 16, so up in this corner right here, lot 16 has frontage, as you can see, along County Trunk Highway BB. However, it doesn't meet adequate site distances, safety issues and things. So the County Highway Department, upon review, has denied any vehicular access to the county highway on this lot. So access to that lot is going to be provided. We zoom in here, a 20-foot wide private access easement. So again, we're dealing with our former land division ordinance. This project was submitted before our new ordinance took place. So we don't have any width or standards for access easements. So right now, they are proposing to access lot 16 with a 20-foot wide access easement off their dedicated town road. The property is currently zoned as general commercial, and under that zoning classification, there is no minimum lot size. So all of the proposed lots on here meet the minimum required lot size. The subject property contains some wooded land, but it's predominantly open. If we go to the next slide, this is the plat superimposed on top of an air photo. So as you can see, most of the site is open, but there are some wooded areas here on the end of the dead end cul-de-sac. It's predominantly open, used mainly for agricultural purposes in the past. There are some mapped wetlands on the property, and the preferred land use according to the Dunn County Comprehensive Land Use Plan is listed as farmland. So the preliminary plat was conducted by a team consisting of members from the Dunn County Environmental Services Department, our Highway Department, the Land Information Office also had input, as well as the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Throughout the review process, we identified areas of concern, made recommendations to the applicant. Most of those recommendations have been incorporated by the applicant into the preliminary plat that we have before us today. The town of Menominee has also reviewed and approved the preliminary plat. That review happened on January 11th of this year. The proposed plat is also located within the 1.5 mile extraterritorial plat review jurisdiction of the city of Menominee. So on the 24th of January of this year, the City Plan Commission reviewed and approved this preliminary plat. On January 25th, the very next day, correspondence was received from Randy Eide, City Public Works Director, that city sanitary sewer service is not reasonably expected to be available to this subdivision within the next 5 to 6 years. So then on February 14th, the Wisconsin Department of Administration Plat Review, who is an objecting authority, they reviewed the plat and provided written certification that their agency had no objection to the plat. So I'm just going to bring up a few other items here. Here are the Plan Commission meeting minutes from January 24th, where the City Plan Commission approved the preliminary plat. This is a statement I received from Randy Eide, City Public Works Director. In our old ordinance, as well as our new ordinance, you may remember we have to explore the possibility that municipal sewer and water, the likelihood of municipal sewer and water being available to the proposed development site within 5 years of project completion. So I reached out to Mr. Eide, and this was his response. They have no plans of extending those types of services to Idella Ridge in the next 5 to 6 years. These are meeting minutes from the town of Menominee. I'm not going to read through them, but they did have some discussion on this plat, and they agreed to approve the preliminary plat. And this is the certification letter from Department of Administration, basically stating that they have no objection to the preliminary plat. So that concludes the supporting documentation relative to this plat. County staff, we've reviewed it, and we feel that in its current form, it meets all the requirements of all the applicable county ordinances that we have in place. So we are recommending approval of the plat. And as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Rosendahl, the developer, is here. He can certainly answer any questions the committee may have. And his surveyor and his engineer are also here. So that concludes my staff report. I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson. I'm wondering if Mr. Rosendahl has any comments he'd like to make before we discuss.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman and county supervisors and the Dunn County staff. First of all, I want to thank Tom and staff for their quick turnaround. We submitted this on December 22nd, and here we sit 60 days later, which by law he had 90 days to review. So I want to thank him and his staff for their timely response and review of our proposed project here. This project started in October of last year with a conceptual presentation to the town of Menominee, and through a series of meetings negotiations, reactions to soil testing, things like this. This is the plat that we have finalized and are presenting for approval here today. I'm happy to answer any questions about the concept, plans, things like that. If there's technical questions that I can't answer, I'm happy to divert those to Kevin or Dustin. But I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and Tom did a wonderful job presenting what our plans are here for Idella Ridge.
Okay, thank you. Does the committee have any questions or comments they want to make?
Mr. Chairman.
Diane.
Yeah, Mr. Rosendahl, it's probably not my place to ask, but I'm just curious about lot 16. It just seems, I don't know, out of place or perhaps should not be developed. I don't know. Would you explain it to me, please?
Sure. Well, I obviously didn't do the survey of the 4.3 acres that is unplatted there. That's in between us. And when this was submitted by Tom's staff to the highway department, I dealt with Dustin, who is your acting highway commissioner. And the property basically fell short by about 15 feet from a site visibility study for access to that parcel. So I contracted with an engineer to do an engineered analysis and basically came up with the same information that Dustin did about site visibility. And so it could be challenged, but the more I thought about it, the access to that's a 45-mile-an-hour road. Everybody is aware in the community that people drive much faster than 45 miles an hour. And I didn't want to expose myself to, or to a potential client, any future liability until County Road Double B is either improved upon. There's a controlled intersection, which speaking with Dustin numerous times, there's some request for funding going on, and he hopes within the next 3 to 5 years that intersection there will be more of a controlled intersection. And so we regrouped and basically brought access off of our private road to lot 16, which will basically, the house will face Double B, but it will have a side entrance garage. Whatever is built there will have a side entrance garage. It doesn't exceed any slope requirements or anything like that. It's much easier to construct that than it is to take the highway commissioner and a county to court, argue over 15 feet, and ultimately we would be exposing people to, a pretty treacherous intersection there. The town residents expressed concerns that live in that area. I know some people that live on that area, and you basically dodge out onto Double B from that road that's right across from lot 16. I will argue that it has the absolute best views of the entire plat and lot confirmation you can see for miles. And when we started this, we had a concept that had 46 lots, if my memory serves me correctly. But after doing soil testings and borings on the entire property, what you see is reduced to lots that actually perked and we know we could build septics on. So I've already sacrificed 20 lots from my initial concept to this concept, and I'm not prepared to sacrifice any more lots. There's a significant cost that goes into purchasing and developing this property. And so we basically just adjusted on the fly and granted access through that lot 17 to lot 16.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
A question for Tom Carlson, please.
Sure.
Tom, what is more ideal, a cul-de-sac or like a ingress and egress, like separate directions? If you had your choice, what is more suitable for the public?
When you say separate directions, you mean like two entrance, a horseshoe type road in here?
Or something that you just don't, that they come in and go out on the same road.
Yeah, so like come in and go out on the same, well,
They don't come in and go out.
Yeah, they don't come in and out on the same road. Either it comes out on a different location, so it's not a cul-de-sac, a dead end, which is more ideal.
well, obviously, if you had two entrances and, two places to access, so that, let's just say there was, and I believe the original plan had a horseshoe road coming in here, and Mr. Rosendahl can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this access easement down here where my hand is came in and made kind of a big horseshoe in here, and these lots were served from that. Personally, I like that notion better. And I think, our emergency responders are more open to that concept as well. It provides, better flexibility and access in times of emergency the more access points you have. But the site itself doesn't lend itself very well to that. As Mr. Rosendahl mentioned, he had done some soil borings along the south end, and the soils there are certainly not suitable for sewer systems. And I can't speak to the engineering side of things, but I suspect, those soils would be difficult to engineer a road across as well. So I think by necessity, he's putting this in here based on circumstances. He can't really run a road through here given site limitations. So although these dead end cul-de-sacs, they serve a purpose, in my mind, they're certainly not ideal. It's one way in and one way out. But again, how do we run a horseshoe road in here with the site limitations? And if we went up this way through lot 16, now we're going up a significant grade here, and we may introduce erosion problems. So I hope I'm answering your question. Our ordinance doesn't prohibit these dead end cul-de-sacs, but our preference would certainly be to have a horseshoe type road in here.
Because what that looks like to me is certain parcels are maybe just not adapted to be subdivided into a high density neighborhood. So, but maybe that's something we look at in our ordinance too, about the cul-de-sacs as compared to two different locations coming in and going out. So that's just my comment. Thank you.
Tom, can I speak?
Yeah.
Or Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
There's nothing in the state statute, local statute, ordinances, anything like that that says we can have a cul-de-sac. I would say that our cul-de-sac exceeds, like everything else on this plat, lot size, green space, everything, the cul-de-sac bulb itself, everything meets or exceeds the town, local, and state ordinances that govern this. It would not be economically feasible to build a road that doesn't service any lots. I mean, we would be adding equally the same amount of distance of road going through our green space that would service absolutely no lots at all. And that's why the initial concept was revised to be what it is here today. And I know of nothing in your Chapter 4 major subdivision or comprehensive zoning that says what we are proposing is not allowed.
Thank you. Other questions?
Supervisor Kinnear here.
Yeah.
First off, I don't know if you call it ex parte or whatever. I want to be open that I did attend 2 of the town plan commission meetings and have really had no other communication with Mr. Rosendahl about this outside of those meetings. So that said, I just, maybe Tom Carlson can answer this. I think this is being rezoned and the town already okayed it. What's the order on this? This can be done without the rezone, or I don't quite understand. Well, what's going on with the rezone versus approving this?
Okay, so I will attempt to answer your question, but Ann is also with us and she may have more insight on this or be better adapted to answer your question. The current zoning is general commercial. There is no minimum lot size, and all of the permitted uses under general commercial are allowed on these lots. So if you look under the permitted uses under GC, all of those uses can be done on these lots. The lots meet the minimum, there is no minimum lot size. So in theory, these could go down to a quarter of an acre, 10,000 square feet, 2,000 square feet. Right now, it's, and perhaps Mr. Rosendahl would want to expand on his plans for the property as well. It's my understanding that some type of residential units are going to be placed on these lots. I hate to get too deep into zoning because it's an area I don't administer, but it's my understanding that if residential type use, or if residential use is going to happen on these lots, they would have to be non-owner occupied. So what does that mean? Rentals, right? You put a duplex on there and rent it out. You can't actually occupy it. You would have to be the landlord. Now, there's nothing preventing Mr. Rosendahl from coming in at any point and rezoning these platted lots to a different district, say R1, R2. He certainly can do that after the fact. But let's just say he comes in, petitions to get into a residential district, and the rezone petition fails. He still can put residential units on here under the general commercial classification, but they would have to be non-owner occupied. And perhaps either Mr. Rosendahl or Ann can elaborate on that if I didn't fully answer your question. But right now, our approval is not, or the committee's approval of this preliminary plat is not contingent on a rezone whatsoever. What he's proposing here meets the general what's allowed under general commercial.
Okay, thank you, Tom. It answered me. I just was wondering what order that had to be done in, and there is no order. So that answers my question.
You're welcome. And typically, you know, in the past, we see the rezone happen first and then the plat follows. But in this case, you know, the rezone could possibly happen at a later date if Mr. Rosendahl chooses to rezone it. But he's not under any obligation to do that at this point. But he is then stuck with the permitted uses under general commercial.
So what you're saying, Tom, is then the way it's zoned right now, they could be down to a sub, like 1 acre lot for residential, right?
Correct.
Wow.
Correct. But a person would have to be careful. So I'm interjecting, just speaking out loud. Let's just say the plan is going forward to rezone this to a residential type unit. Well, you had better plan for that ahead of time and make these lots so they're conforming with the requirements of R1. So as you can see, these are all at least 1 acre lot sizes. I don't see any of these under an acre. So if Mr. Rosendahl, down the road would rezone this into a residential district, all these lots at that point would meet the minimum required lot size. So, but in theory, correct, he could make some, and there is no minimum lot size today under general commercial. So these lots in theory could go down to very, very small, but he's chosen to make them at least 1 acre, if not greater.
Are these going to be then like your duplexes, or are they going to be like the single family? You know?
I can't speak to that.
Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes, sir.
Are these lots going to be used primarily for single family, or are they going to be duplexes?
Sir, I'll tell you right now where we're at is in the month of late January and February, we went before the town of Menominee Planning Commission and the town board. And we have a unanimous approval to rezone lots 1 through 26 into the R2 district. I have contacted and have the packet that Ann provided me to request that from the county. I have not submitted that at this point because I've kind of taken this one step at a time, and I'm going to let this be approved based on the merits that it is. It conforms with zoning. It conforms with lot sizes. It conforms with green space requirement from the town, the road width, the cul-de-sac, and everything else. So after today, I will react to the decision that's made. I'm in the process of costing out 4 different homes, a couple different twin homes, and some duplexes. And when I get that cost analysis back and completed, then I will make my decision on the next step that I want to take these 26 lots to. Lots 27, 28, and 29, along with the CSM in the bottom right corner of your, is already slated and been submitted for state approval to build mini and maxi warehouses. That's an approved agenda under section 13.2.10, page 20 of your comprehensive zoning ordinance. So that's what's in plans for that. The outlot is 115-acre green space park area that we plan to develop into a park kind of nature area, along with the necessary retention ponds that Cedar Corp has put on here and required under the stormwater. And we've currently applied for our NR 151. I believe Kevin calls it something else, but I know it is that. I apologize if I'm speaking incorrectly. But until I get my cost analysis completed, I'm not going to commit to anything other than these lots conform, they fit under the zoning. And as Tom spoke to, I could build single or multi-family duplexes, or I could rezone it into R2, which I've already taken the first step with the town and received unanimous approval.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
This is Mike again for Tom Carlson. Tom, you mentioned that when Mr. Rosendahl originally brought this to you, that you had some concerns and most of those were incorporated into this already. So what kind of things did you ask for that he made changes for?
Okay,
And ones that you didn't get satisfied?
And I anticipated your question, Supervisor Kinnear, so I am fully prepared. So this is the letter that was sent out back on February 7th. And these are things I typically don't share with the committee. I mean, you just want to know at the end, does it meet acceptance or not? So to give you an example, these are some of the things that, some of the things we've identified over the phone and, we work back and forth verbally, but at the end, I sent an actual form letter to Dustin LeBlanc of these changes. So, and some of these are just very minor, a note about no direct access on certain lots, replacing a word registered with professional. So we did, this is what I would consider more of a bigger ticket item. We recommended a 75-foot buffer around all of the mapped wetlands. So they had a certified wetland professional come out and delineate these areas. I believe there's 3 of them on the plat. You may remember on Timber Valley, we asked for the same thing, a 75-foot buffer around the mapped wetlands, basically a building restriction to afford greater protection to those mapped wetlands. In our current ordinance, that's actually a requirement now, but again, we're operating under the old ordinance. So this is one of those words we have to be careful. We can't require it, but we can recommend it. So number 4 here, we recommended a 75-foot buffer. We did not get that. The preliminary plat that we have in front of us doesn't have that buffer. And we can't require it. We asked for it. And of course it does, intrude into some of the net buildable area of the lots that are adjacent to it. So I understand from the developer side why he's hesitant to show this buffer. And again, we can't require it. So we have to be very careful hinging our decision today on items that are recommended versus required. A datum on the elevations, a note about the ownership of the outlot. I mean, these are just some of the things behind the scenes that you don't typically see. We asked the question, is there going to be a utility easement needed along the private access easement serving these 3 lots? We asked for the wetland delineation report, which we have now. We discussed some drainage easements on a couple of the lots. Notes about who's going to benefit from the access easements, the retention ponds, how will vehicular access be provided to lot 16? Because that was a question we had. We knew that the access was denied off the county highway. Well, what are your plans? We can't approve a lot, even with frontage, that doesn't have vehicular access. Just some labeling notes here. Number 16 was another item that I would consider, rose to a fairly high level for us. The lowest building opening on the most northerly proposed retention pond is at 885 feet. When you look at the contours of the property, we just felt that lots 2 through 4 could have the potential for some flooding in a catastrophic event if that pond would ever top over. So let's just go back here to the plat. So the pond we're referring to is retention pond number 2. If everybody can see that. So in a catastrophic event, and I'm not an engineer, but we do have a land and water conservation division, and there's some really well-educated staff there that understand engineering concepts. So when they were reviewing this, they were concerned if this pond would overtop based on the contours of the existing lots, water could potentially, inundate a good portion of lots 2, 3, and 4. After talking with Kevin Oyam, the project engineer, he had mentioned some of the safeguards that went into this. And then the possibility that perhaps some fill, when the road is being constructed, some fill will be placed on lots 2 through 4, which would bring the existing elevation of these lots up substantially higher as well. So again, we've got an engineer certifying to plans here, and we have to trust that, he knows what he's talking about. I'm certainly not an engineer. Kevin has assured me that, they've looked at all this and they don't feel it is a concern, but it is something we brought up. So those 3 items, protection of these lots from flooding, the 75-foot buffer around the wetlands. So by the way, these cross-hatched areas are the wetland areas. So if you buffer this area right here, it's going to come into, quite a ways into lots 2 and 3. We've got another wetland down here that could potentially come into lot 29. And then we've got another wetland on lots 11 and 12. Well, if you buffer that, it reduces the net buildable area of those lots. So those are the 3 things. When I mentioned most of the recommendations were incorporated into this, those are the 3 that were not. And we don't feel they rise to the level of a denial of this submission. So does that answer your question, Supervisor?
Well, thank you, Tom. I kind of wanted to revisit that there's a whole lot that goes on in the background. It's been going on for a long time. This may surprise Mr. Rosendahl, I'm not sure or not, but it meets requirements. We need to approve it. But I wanted to go on a little bit. If it's going to be developed, I think this is a good plan. The town of Menominee has a good subdivision ordinance that he's gone through. I think they have a good developers agreement set up. So it's going to be developed, and I think Mr. Rosendahl has done a good job making it fit in. I'm not real pleased about lots of developments in the country that are close because of groundwater, but I think this is as good as you're going to get with this number of lots in this area. And I live within sight distance of it. So that's just my input.
Tom?
Yeah.
Could I speak, Chairman?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Kinnear. I appreciate those kind comments, and you've been very nice to work with. We've had a couple conversations on the phone, and you shared an email with me back in November 2nd. I think the town would say that we've been very respectful of the ordinance. We've been easy to deal with. We have essentially given them everything that they wanted at the sacrifice of what some would say profits. I live in this community. I've been here since '93. I've developed in the town of Sherman and the town of Red Cedar. All of you could go on CCAP or familiarize yourself around town. I think that we have an excellent reputation. We do what we say. And the couple things that we didn't provide to the county that they asked for, we just didn't feel, even though it's under the new ordinance and we're under the old, that with holding the buildings up on lots 2, 3, and 4, like Kevin said, with some fill, but holding the basements typically, almost 2 feet above the road to get our 8% grade away from buildings and stuff like that. I can say out of 350 homes I've built in the last 20 plus years, I've never had a basement flood, and it won't start here. But it just wasn't necessary to put those buffers on there because basically the house sits 75 feet from the center line of the road, if I understand the ordinances correctly, for driveway and setbacks. And with that taken into consideration with the grade, the size of the ponds, where they're located on the lots, we just didn't feel like we needed to add that on to a permanent, the permanent of the plat itself. And then we gave a little bit of pushback, which we haven't done. So I wanted to address that. Tom and his staff had asked for shared ownership of this outlot green space to be shared equally between all 29 lots. And I chose to push back on that because if I do rezone, which is the intentions, that lots 26, the 1 through 26 will eventually someday be turned over to a homeowners association and be governed by them. It doesn't happen with my restrictive covenants, which the town has received and approved of along with the developers agreement. But with 27, 28, 29 going to remain commercial, I didn't feel, and neither did my legal staff, that it was good to have those two things joined together. Basically, you have a commercial business and you have 26 residential homeowners. And so basically, we're designating all of lot 1 to those 26 home sites with some type of, and we haven't worked out the language yet, is all of the stormwater calculations and everything for the size of the ponds were all derived on the runoff and everything from the commercial lots also. So somehow in our language with the developers agreement, the restrictive covenants, we have to come up with some kind of suitable language that everybody is going to be aware that the runoff from lots 27, 28, 29 go on to outlot 1. But I didn't want to share ownership, commercial and potential residential. So those are the only two items that we pushed back on. I think Tom can attest we've been easy to work with. We attended a meeting way back in, I believe, early October at the request of the county. And we have worked diligently with the Planning Commission, the neighbors, and the town board to come up with what you see before you, which I hope you feel is a very well thought out use of the land for future development.
Chairman Quinn, just one point of clarification. I did speak with Mr. Rosendahl on the phone, but declined to speak about the development because of the ex parte communication idea. The only time we had communication about this development was in a public meeting at the Menominee Plan Commission.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Just a couple of comments. You all need to know that I am very impressed with everything I see and what I've heard here today. I think there's been a lot of study and it looks very good. And I would finally say, I know the reputation of Mr. Rosendahl is excellent because everything that he's built before, he has backed it up. And I'm impressed with what he's done. And I live in a town of Menominee too, not close to this, but I'm fully going to support it. I want you to know.
Okay, I do have one question, Mr. Rosenthal. You mentioned that the lots are set up so that they all meet septic requirements. Do those requirements change depending upon the density of the housing on each lot? Or is that something you factored into the, it's a little bit different as a single family using a septic system as opposed to a 4-unit building or something. How you address that?
The septic is determined by the soil analysis done by the certified soil expert. Will Hoyt did all of that. He does a lot in the county. They all came back perked at mound systems. Depending upon the size of the building that's put on there from a bedroom and bathroom standpoint is what determines the size of the septic system themselves. Your new ordinance says that all the lots have to be perked, and Tom can correct me if I'm wrong, ahead of time. And so basically, when I made this kind of investment, I went ahead and did that anyways. And that's where we came up with, you know, lots 27, 28, 29, and basically the most of that outlot, it didn't perk. 5 feet underground, it's muck. And so we had to regroup and resize. But to answer your question, if I go the R2 route and I combined 2 of these lots and made it a twin home, Dunn County says that I have to provide 1 acre per side, 1 well per side, and 1 septic per side. If I build it out as 26 single-family homes, I have to put 1 well and 1 septic on each lot. And the same requirement would be in place if I built a duplex on each lot. It would still remain 1 well and 1 septic, which I have in the town of Sherman. It requires you to put a house meter on the home. You can't pass the energy cost and all of that onto the tenant because there's no way to equally divide it for the pump and all of that running. And so you end up with a 3-gang meter box on the building, and you run the well and the pump and pay a house energy charge. But the soil dictates the septic style, and the amount of bedrooms and bathrooms dictates the size. Is that correct, Tom?
I'm not a sanitation expert. I can't answer that.
Well,
Well, Mr. Chairman, I can tell you after 30 years that I think I'm exactly correct.
okay, I'm sure you are. Thank you very much. It's helpful. Appreciate that. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Dan.
No question for Mr. Rosendahl, just a comment. I mean, generally speaking, I have concerns about groundwater in septic placement and so on in high density development, but I'm also really, I'm very appreciative of the advanced work that's been done here, the consultation with the county and its expertise and with the township. And I'm also really cognizant of the fact that we have a pretty serious housing issue in the county. And I'm supportive of this development for those reasons. The amount of planning that has gone forward, the concurrence of the town of Menominee, and the need that I think we all recognize for additional housing.
Can I speak to that, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Thank you, Supervisor Morehouse. I went on the MLS this morning. Maybe some of you don't know, but I'm a licensed broker. I don't really practice that aspect of the business. It's more for information purposes to help come up with the concepts and ideas that produce Idella Ridges. There was 6 homes for sale in Dunn County this morning. There is 4 homes for sale in the city, and there is 4 homes with 2 active offers, what we call out of the city. So there's a severe shortage of housing in our community. And I own a substantial real estate portfolio of rental property. And I will tell you, last year I had 1 vacancy and I had 37 applicants for 1 3-bedroom rental unit. It's a real problem. If we're not growing, we're shrinking. And I think it's been represented with businesses that haven't come into our community because we don't have the workforce to adequately supply their labor needs. So as no one really likes to have a development built in their neighborhood, there is a severe shortage in Dunn County for housing. I'm not going to call it affordable housing anymore. I will tell you that my first bid came in 2,300 square foot, 3-car garage at a price tag of $460,000, which is staggering to what I was building 3 years ago. That house would have been maybe 320. So we're definitely in an inflation cycle that is making me look at all of the different avenues for developing this, because I'm not so sure how many people can afford $460,000, $500,000 houses in Dunn County. But I appreciate your kind comments. Hopefully we have done our due diligence, and we look forward to developing the property and in conjunction with the town and the county.
And Mr. Chairman, just a quick follow-up, if I may.
Yes.
We just received word yesterday that the community development block grant for our housing study has been approved. So the housing study is going forward, but I mean, obviously the county considers this issue of such seriousness that we are embarking on a comprehensive study to look at some of our options and possibilities for addressing this issue, because it's serious. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, I could address that, but I don't think it's appropriate for this meeting. But I will just say you that I've developed in every community in the Chippewa Valley, from Cornell to Prescott, Wisconsin, and everywhere in between. And it is a grueling process in Dunn County. And we talk about, eating up land and I've voiced it to the town chairman in Menominee. I'm not disputing their 30% green space. This particular 40 didn't suit itself for housing in that area anyways because of soil testing. But when you have the requirements that Dunn County does for, say, the Twin Oak and 2 acres and dual septics and do all of that, you push developers right out of this community. This is not a big win for RPC Homes and myself financially, personally. I was retired up until this came about here 6 months ago. And it just seemed like a really nice opportunity, but the process is draining, it's grueling, it duplicates itself. The requirements far exceed most of the municipalities and counties around our surrounding area. And that's why I think you see Eau Claire and Chippewa and other areas exploding, and we're not growing at all. And it's a shame. We have a spectacular community. We have a great school district. We have some great employers, a wonderful university. But it's hard to invest in Dunn County and make it work. And I think it's something that the committee should seriously look at.
So,
Mr. Chairman?
I appreciate those comments and really take them to heart. And I think that that's one of the things, that kind of discussion is one of the things that I know Diane, Supervisor Morehouse is hoping that the housing study that we do will be able to address to some degree. So thanks. Gary, you had a comment.
I have one question of Mr. Rosenthal and then one comment. Does any of the storm water, does it all go to outlet 1 or does some go across the road to the creek?
I'm going to defer that to Kevin, who is the engineer for the site.
Yeah, I can step in. So yes, basically for the entire development, there's 2 ponds and all the runoff, including what's proposed in the future for the commercial area, is going to go to those 2 regional facilities and then ultimately discharge to the south. There's a culvert that's underneath the railroad grade.
Okay.
That's ultimately where it will discharge out to.
Okay. And my one comment is,
can't hear him.
Gary, we lost your sound.
there we go. I'm also on a county board, and when we done our comprehensive plan, we sent out surveys, and one of the top proponents of the survey was to keep the community rural. I mean, maybe that's why there's such a great, that people want to live in Dunn County because of the rural environment. But you keep on putting these high density housing out in the ag community, you know, you might be spoiling, you're helping the housing part, but you might be spoiling part of what makes Dunn County special. So that's just my comment.
Sir, can I respond to that?
Real quickly.
Okay, and I'm not debating what you're saying, but I would say this is not considered high density, okay? If you go down in the industrial park and you put houses on a 1/4 acre or a 1/3 acre where they can pass milk through the window to the next house, that's high density. 1 and 2 acre lots is not high density. at all. And just to show you the conflict of like your ordinances for this, under the general commercial on this lot one, let's just take lot one. I can build a duplex and I can put a well and a septic and I got 2 families living there. If I want to make that a twin home, I have to combine that with lot 1 and 2. So now I've donated 3 acres for what could be the same building under one ordinance, but under a different zoning classification, R2. I have to combine those 2 lots and give each person 1 acre to themselves, a separate well and a separate septic. That's over $25,000 just for the well and the septic, along with now donating almost 3 acres to one under the general commercial classification can be suitable on lot 1 by itself. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense if you say it fast, backwards, or any other direction.
Okay.
And that's the problem with developing in Dunn County. I'm not knocking the county. I'm obviously here presenting something. I'm investing substantial amount of money. When this is built out, this is, $10 million plus. So I'm not backing away from the county, but it's things like that in your comprehensive zoning and major subdivision ordinances that they don't make sense. It does not make sense.
Thank you. Any final comments or questions from the committee? Okay, then I'd accept a motion on action on the preliminary plat.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve as proposed.
I will second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Supervisor Anderson and Supervisor Morehouse. Any further questions? Then all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? No. Motion carries. The plat's approved. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to come today and be part of this discussion. It's really important and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on then to our final item, which is a review of groundwater ad hoc committee recommendations.
All right, good morning again, everyone. With me today, Heather Wood is with us today, our water resource specialist with our Land and Water Conservation Division, as well as Jeff Robb. Jeff is with the Environmental Health section within Public Health Department here with Dunn County. We've been working together along with Amy of the Environmental Health Department as well to look at, have a discussion about our groundwater ad hoc committee recommendations and items moving forward. In your packet, you would have seen the typical matrix of elements for our work plan for the groundwater ad hoc committee. And we have basically took those recommendations and then provided a report to you, a progress report once a month. Knowing that there was some onboarding time period over the last year with transition in staff, we've taken the approach here to address those items on a more of a timeline outline process to give you, the committee, an idea of when we will bring each one of those work plan elements back to this committee for a thorough discussion about staff capacity, goals and intentions of the recommendation, and then what our next steps will be to accomplish that. I'm going to share my screen here and let Heather walk us through the outline that I would have sent to you separately from the packet. And then we will come back to have a further discussion about one of the elements, particularly the well monitoring program and potential funding source that we're hoping to have your support as well as guidance on as we move forward. So give me a second here to share my screen. Okay, you should be able to see a groundwater ad hoc work plan, current activity outline. Does that, everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, Heather, you want to kind of just walk the committee through what, and I would just mention that, you know, Heather and I have worked together on this, but she's done a lot of the work in the background. You may see my face at these committee meetings more often than hers, but she's done a lot of the work, background work for this type of topic, and I will hopefully to bring Jeff into the conversation as we move forward with some of the well monitoring program too. So Heather, I'll let you take it away and we can answer questions after.
All right, sounds good, thanks. So like Chase mentioned, this is kind of a outline action plan sort of view of how we're going about the ad hoc recommendations. And I'll just start right at the top. We want to start working with launching a voluntary well testing program. Right now, we actually have sampling supplies available in our offices for both CTL and UW Stevens Point. But at the moment, that is still at the cost of the homeowner. So we're hoping to get something going where we can help fund that sort of a program. That's really important, and that is, we'll kind of circle back and have a bit more of an in-depth conversation about that particular element here. But we'll kind of go through the rest of this here. Aggregating this existing spatial data, that is the groundwater mapping application that Rachel over in Land Information has built. Krista Vind has been working on building the actual website itself, and this will be put in as part of that website. I put together a bunch of additional background groundwater data, but the mapping application itself will be built into the website, which is the next element in line. Like I mentioned, that is currently being worked on for the groundwater part, the groundwater quality part. And then I am going to be building a groundwater quantity part in the coming months. Ideally, I would like to start with a surface water page for that website as well, but that's kind of a long-term goal for next year. The next element would be the stormwater management ordinance and an erosion control ordinance. I grouped these two things together in the existing ad hoc recommendations outline. They're two separate things, if I remember correctly. They would likely be done together because they would be so complementary. And this is what I want to do here is just start out with the very base of identify what you in the committee would like to see from these ordinances. Evaluate what kind of a staff time contribution we would have to make in order to get this to be something that we can actually take care of. Reviewing the existing ordinances that we have and seeing if there's any sort of redundancies to try and reduce that. So our goal for that is to have kind of an outline of what we would need in order to get that done by April. Next element, nutrient management plans. There's the 100% goal, and we have the nutrient management specialist does a lot of work with all kinds of people, and he can definitely speak more to this element than I can. But I imagine you'll be hearing from him in May, if I remember correctly. The wetland conservation standards or the wetland ordinance development. The wetland conservation standards I'm not particularly familiar with, but they are referenced in the groundwater ad hoc report, which is why they're thrown in here. This is another thing where we're going to start out, what is the purpose of this ordinance? What are we going for? What do we want? Are there redundancies in, for example, the shoreline ordinance or the shoreline zoning? And so that's something where we want to, again, figure out if there's any, what we need to do for that one. And the goal for that is sometime in May. Next element is to establish the county initiative to support agricultural diversity as an economic development and water quality strategy. This one, I'm not entirely sure what this means when it was written. So that's kind of a conversation that we would like to have sometime in June. Similarly and related, promoting a farmer-led rotational grazing initiative. This is something where we need to figure out what we can do and what you would like to see us do with this. And again, that's another June item. Developing the education and information campaign with stakeholders. So this is a couple of things kind of grouped together. There was the community stakeholders aspect of it, and then there's the agricultural community aspect of it. And there's a lot of overlap between those communities, of course. So we kind of just clumped these two things together. We want to develop an informational campaign that's focused on the agricultural community, but then also work to engage and collaborate with the general community at large. The goal for this would be to have something in September. And for this, we're kind of thinking, looking into the different avenues of getting the word out, looking into various ways to put out educational material, as well as actually making the material itself. The Water Resources Council, and this one we've discussed, and I know we kind of tabled it for a little while. We kind of want to reassess what are the reasonable alternatives for the original council idea. We kind of stepped back from the whole council concept, but Chase has mentioned in the conversations that he referenced before, maybe doing a yearly forum with stakeholders or something to that effect. But we want to take a step back, reevaluate, and see what we can actually do that might fall into this sort of a category that might not maybe mesh with the original intent, but would still get similar goals accomplished. Next thing, grant citation authority to the ENS. This is, as mentioned in the timeline, pretty dependent on Corporation Council. And this is just, how do we fully do the enforcement part of our new ordinance? And then the final part is the update of the comprehensive land use plan. Again, this is something where we have to partner with zoning while doing this. And so this is a bit more open of a timeline, but we're hoping to do this by the end of the year.
Thanks, questions? Heather. Yeah, I would just add that these dates and timelines here are intended for us to, in our work planning, to make sure that we're staying on task with the recommendations and getting a report to all of you as well as members of the public, but also as kind of a heads up for you all as we make a plan to intentionally talk about each one of these on these dates when we come back to this committee meeting and talk about groundwater ad hoc committee recommendations. So please, if your time allows, be prepared to have those conversations about those specific items and think about the goals and intentions of those work plan elements when we get to them. And we'll be prepared to bring you our evaluation and questions and thoughts regarding each one of these items, as well as hopefully being able to have an assessment of staff capacity depending on the direction we head with each one of the elements. So I hope you find this helpful in looking at the year ahead, and that we're going to continue to make more intentional progress now that we're somewhat established here with staffing and moving forward in some of our other areas within our division. So if there's any questions particularly related to this outline, we'd be happy to answer them. As a reminder, we'd like to go back and discuss this very first one regarding the well monitoring program before we leave today.
Thanks, Chase and Heather. This is really helpful. Are any questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I just would like to say, with your permission, well done. Thanks. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go back then and review the well testing.
Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Heather again and then invite Jeff to chime in as necessary for the public health perspective. I'm also going to switch my screen here and share another document that you probably haven't received, but this is our outline of notes to describe a potential well monitoring program within Dunn County as it pertains to potential use of ARPA funds. So we are aware that County Board is accepting ideas for use of ARPA funds at an upcoming meeting here in March. And this would be, I guess, presented to you today to have a conversation about what a well monitoring program would look like if funding was available. Look for some of your guidance and direction on what type of monitoring you would like to do. We have some recommendations here. And then also establish the timeline. Likely your decision will need to be an action item on an upcoming committee agenda here, probably the first meeting in March, in order to make the timeline for County Board. But with that, I'll turn it over to Heather here. Again, she worked on pulling a lot of this information together, and we've worked with Jeff as well to give that public health perspective. So we'll be happy to answer any questions and have a discussion here once Heather finishes the presentation. Heather?
All right, thanks. So this is a rough outline of what a potential groundwater monitoring program could look like. None of these numbers are, we're not committed to any of these numbers in particular. This is just a general outline of what we think it would look like. We would likely want to do something back up. So we picked 500 samples because it's a nice number to work with, and we could get a pretty good size cross section of the county that way. The idea being we would have 100 of the samples go as just voluntary, first come, first serve, give me a call and we'll come down and sample your well type of situation. The other 400 samples would be significantly more targeted. Now, this would be based on a variety of factors. We have the spatial data for the mapping application. And so ideally, I would want to start there and identify any sort of data gaps in terms of geography, and then look at the age of the data. There's the data in that mapping application goes back to, I want to say 1985. So it's been a little while for some of those samples. And so we want to get a more refreshed version so we can see what does the groundwater look like currently. Beyond that, it would likely go down to something prorated based on population. Since the towns where there are more people, there's going to be more private wells. We would want to do the comprehensive homeowners package through UW-Stevens Point. And we picked Point because this is a public lab. Because this would be public funds, we believe that it should be public data. So we would go through the comprehensive homeowners package, which includes the general homeowners kit, and that is nitrates and, oh geez, I can't remember everything that's in the general homeowners kit, but nitrates, nitrites, the metal scan, and the DAX screen is all included in the comprehensive homeowners. We might, depending on areas that have high phosphorus, and if we do have the money, if money allows, then move into the pharmaceuticals and personal care products. The purpose of that test is to kind of give us an idea of where the nitrates are coming from. There's some compounds that are typically found in ag chemicals and others that are typically found in, artificial sweeteners, for instance, that they're not spreading that on the fields. The tertiary, I suppose, thing that we would be thinking about testing for would be PFAS. I've been receiving some questions about PFAS. I imagine, it's been in the news lately. It's a pretty big problem in some areas. I did reach out to the town, and they do test for them. They tested for them in 2015 and are scheduled to test again in 2024. And right now, the city of Menominee's municipal wells are non-detectable. So they're not detectable, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily everywhere in the county that they're not detectable. So that would be a very heavily targeted thing. Significantly fewer samples would be taken if we do go that route, simply because it is very expensive. It's almost $600 for a single PFAS test. The idea would be to kind of maybe go with each of the individual town halls. So collect a sample there and have that be kind of our PFAS estimate for the town, if you will. But again, that would be pretty expensive, and we would likely want to pull that out of the private well sampling budget, since at the end of the day, the books need to balance. For a program like this, it would be a pretty heavy investment of staff time. And we've talked, like Chase mentioned, we've been working with the folks down in public health, and there's not really any sort of formal commitment to time or anything like that, but this is a rough estimate of how much the project prep time would take, shipping, going through and interpreting the data, getting it out to folks that participate in the program, and actually going out to collect the samples. I hesitate to just send bottles with folks and have them collect it, because there's a lot of quality control issues that could go wrong along the way, and it doesn't seem like a responsible use of taxpayer dollars to not do our own version of quality control. So, and for 500 samples, the rough estimate would be about 500 hours of staff time to get all of this put together. There's a wide variety of ways we can go about doing this. We can do 500 different wells. We can look at doing, there is some known seasonality to how nitrates move in groundwater systems. So we could look at doing, 250 samples in winter, and then sample the same 250 wells in the late summer to see how things fluctuate over time. There's a wide variety of how to do things. We can increase the number of samples, we can decrease the number of samples, and this is kind of where we'd like some input on what you would like to see from this sort of a program.
Thanks, Heather. Just a couple of comments that I would like to make here. So due to estimating staff time, availability, looking at what we think might be a reasonable request for the use of ARPA funds here within the county, as well as trying to look at ways to fill data gaps and offer a free well monitoring program. We've in this outline here have described this package based on 500 samples. We included the prices of pharmaceuticals and personal care products to look at, or for you to consider if that's of interest, as well as PFAS. And the likelihood for follow-up type of monitoring program, we could follow up with landowners that may be testing high in nitrates, for example, with some of these other personal care product, pharmaceutical type tests. So right now the proposal would be to collect 500 samples, doing a comprehensive homeowners package. We would target, or I shouldn't say target, but reach out to all 22 townships and their town halls to express or determine their interest in this program, whether or not the use of ARPA funds would be needed by those towns. Maybe there is interest by the towns themselves to sample their own town hall well for some of these things, which could supplement the program. As Heather mentioned, we would have 100 voluntary samples that we could facilitate with random landowners that wanted to get tested, and otherwise we would target 400 samples based on some of the criteria that Heather described. We reviewed this with Jeff, and I'll give him an opportunity here to express any perspective he has, just to make sure that we have that we're looking at the right type of monitoring and the data that we would like to collect. Nitrates is a common discussion. It's cheap and relatively easy to test for, but it's also an indicator nutrient. And if nitrates are there, what else is with it? This is why we have the metal scan as well as this trizine scan incorporated as part of this comprehensive homeowners kit. You will note here in the notes that we are not considering the sampling of bacteria. I can let Jeff elaborate on this, but from our perspective, not that bacteria is not important. We would recommend landowners test for bacteria annually, as is recommended by the state. But due to logistics of our monitoring program, bacteria tends to be create a lot of additional work and confusion potentially based on just the quality control, like Heather mentioned, of sample collection. There could be a lot of plumbing issues or other things that are beyond our control or that we're unaware of that could give a false bacteria presence result, which then would potentially skew the information we're trying to gather. So Jeff, I guess if you would like to provide any perspective or comment here, otherwise we can move on with questions from the committee.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, Heather. We did meet and talk about kind of this plan, and they kind of wanted the public health perspective, and I think we're lucky to have Jason and Heather who kind of already have that public health perspective and wanting to do what's best for the public. So appreciate their work on this plan. Like Chase said with the bacteria, that's something that homeowners can test on their own for fairly cheap. And like you said, there's some user error that can cause some of those bacteria issues that, yes, they're concerning, but I think the focus of this monitoring program would be on that homeowner package to see where things at, so we can get data for where we're at as a community, because we have a lot of public comments, people concerned about their groundwater, so people are interested in it. So I think having some data to share with the public and say, yes, there is an issue, or hey, maybe there's not as big as issue as we thought. So I think this plan is a good thought out plan. I think one thing I'd add is that we talked about is providing education for when I think the lab can do a lot of that too, in public health too, is provide education when they get their results. What do these results mean? How to interpret those results? What are kind of the next steps for the homeowner? Because sometimes if we get information, we don't understand it, then it can cause a lot of panic and questions. So I think providing the education beforehand, the education afterwards, I think will be a key element of this plan. So appreciate Heather and Jason, their work on this.
Thanks, Jeff. And I would echo on, you reminded me of that discussion we had about the education component. And you're correct. If we go through Stevens Point lab or whatever lab we decide to go through, as Heather mentioned, we would recommend it be a public lab. So that way that data is entered into the public system, and we avoid any potential other issues that may not function or bode well for our use of these, making this data available to the public. It would be, eventually this information will be incorporated as part of our mapping software that Heather and Rachel in Land Information have worked on to establish, and you will see rolled out here when the new website is completed for the county. But there will be an intentional educational component of the results and responding to those individual landowners with interpretation. And if there's questions about land use and other well components, they can be directed here to our office, or well construction and public health concerns can be directed towards public health. But we'll be working together continuously on this. So at this point, I think in the conversation, we'll be opening up for questions and discussion about your thoughts on the intention of this program. And as well as think about the timeline here. Maybe some of you can correct me, but I believe we have a little bit of time here, maybe through 2024, if I'm not corrected, to spend ARPA dollars within the county. I apologize if that's not the correct date, but knowing that we're setting up this program, we want to make sure that we have the ability to collect this and see this program through in a timely fashion. if it's going to be funded with those funding sources. So with that, Chairman Quinn, I'll turn it back to you and we can have this discussion further.
Thank you, Chase. Thanks, Heather. This is really, really helpful. And I know it's been a lot of work. So, and Jeff also, we really appreciate it. Does the committee have, so I meant, just so I understand it, Chase. So this is sort of the discussion draft that we will try and hone over the next couple meetings so that we have a request we can take to the county board for consideration of funding. And that we're not sure exactly when that meeting
my understanding is that requests for ARPA funds need to be to county board in March. Therefore, our next committee meeting coming up on March 8th, I believe, is when I would recommend that you take action on what type of funds or the amount of funds you would like to request for such a program.
Okay. Any questions from the committee?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Diane.
I'm just curious how you derived sample size. Was it based on practicality? Was it based on some proportion of the number of wells in the county? Just give me some indication of how you derived the sample of 500.
Originally, we were wanting to sample one well within every section within the county. And the rough estimate for that is 792 sections. That being said, there are some sections where there's just not going to be any wells. And so we went down to a nice square number, basically. We can move this if the committee would like to see, we want to shoot for that one sample per section. Like I said, this is a draft idea. So if you would like to see more, we can scale up to our estimates of time and dollar amounts.
If I could just add to that too, I agree with what Heather said, as well as what she said at the end there was staff capacity, looking at what we have resources for to pull this off. I do think it's important that we facilitate the collection of the data or collection of the sample. I think that would give, as Heather mentioned earlier, some quality control to the effort. I also think that the 500 samples based on the dollar amount, we thought long and hard about is what is a reasonable request for ARPA funds, knowing the amount of money we have and maybe the intentions that the county has to use those funds. But ultimately, it's up to your decision as to how much you think you would like to request. You get into one sample per section. If we were to do, let's say 792 samples, we're looking at, over $115,000 of a request. So I think it's dependent upon your goals for the program and the timeline that we have to get the funds spent. So therefore, we settled on the round number as Heather mentioned, and maybe we would round that up to 75,000 just to make it even more round and give us some wiggle room.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Gary.
You were saying that you want to go to the Stevens Point because there's more public access, I guess. Would the samples be named by the individual, or the sample would go to a specific section? How would like the private person have its privacy concerns?
Yeah, and so the data is built into public aggregate data. So for instance, right now, the county website that we have, the closest you can zoom in is by section. And it's averaged out by section. There's no names or addresses or any sort of information like that attached to the data. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chase, if somebody really wanted to get all of the individual lab slips, they could make a public records request of us. But I guess from my understanding, I haven't really heard of that happening because of the sheer amount of effort you have to go through. If somebody wants to snoop into your individual, private lab test, the public facing data is not at all privately identifiable. It's by section.
Yeah, I would just add to that too. Heather explained it well, and I think the benefit of having it, and this is no discredit to the Colfax lab. I think they're an important component in our community, and certainly would encourage landowners and homeowners to get their well tested through that lab. The perspective that we have is, if it goes through a public lab, that data is then aggregated on a statewide basis as part of a larger data set. So when policies and other agencies and officials are making decisions regarding groundwater, our data can be part of that conversation and included in that map. Stevens Point Lab has been kind of the housing hub for that. But we've also talked with Jeff, and I'm in communication with Eau Claire County's public health lab as to whether or not they can facilitate such a sampling program here as well, closer to home, and we can make that happen. But Heather's correct on the privacy standpoint. There's no intention to display personal information on these maps, but as a public entity, we are subject to public records requests, and we would make that known when we are participating with potential people that would get their well sampled, that they are aware of that situation. So,
a couple more comments. I think that might be a problem because I have neighbors that think that these vaccines for COVID has little chips in it where the government can track them. So, I mean, there's people out there that really prize their privacy. And the only other thing is like Red Cedar farmers, quite a bit, some of their grant money is going towards like water testing. And you were saying that $73,000, that would be nice to round it up to 75. I would say go up to 100,000. That'd be my opinion. So, thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Mike, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something with Chase and Heather and Jeff. What you've got here as a draft proposal is basically what you think you are able to accomplish given your time. If we had $300,000, we could do a whole lot more, but I'm assuming that we probably couldn't get it done. Is that kind of what we're looking at too?
Yeah, I think so. Looking at all the other hats that we wear and other programs that we have, we're going to look at basically two people trying to accomplish this, Heather being the primary one, and then bits and pieces of other staff to try to carry this out. And I think it would be really cool if we could do a $300,000 monitoring program and sustain that. But we're going to have a serious conversation about what other aspects of our positions and our roles here for Dunn County would have to take a back seat while we accomplished it.
Okay, thank you. And I'd kind of like to hear from Board Chair Bartlett about an amount. I kind of think Supervisor Bjork has an idea, a good idea, as 100,000 might seem a little better. But Dave, what do you think about the amount?
Having been to some of the other committee meetings and listened to the what probably is going to be the ask for the highway department and what is the need at the highway department going forward, is the way I understand it, between for probably next year's budget, they're probably going to be looking at the need of around $5 million, a little more, which could come from ARPA funds or it could come from borrowing. But that is, they're looking at a number of roads like County B, where it would be a 80-20 split if we were to take advantage of that. which is a lot of money from the state that they have put in for different projects, and we would have to come up with our 20% split. Now that also comes up with a little bit of money for some equipment, not a lot, but the majority of it is in projects. So that being said, there should be, and realizing that there's 100,000 taken out of that already for broadband. The $100,000 figure should be able to be accomplished and still be able to fund our highway department without any borrowing for the 2023 budget. Of course, any amount of money that we use in ARPA funds could be used to offset borrowing for the 2024 budget. So, but I would support using $100,000 for water quality testing. I really think it's needed in the county. I would like to see something on the quantity of water for testing too. I noticed there's nothing here on that. I have major concerns of areas where we have heavy irrigation wells and what that's doing to our water quantity. My own personal well, I can testify that it seems to have gone down since it was drilled 40 years ago. So anyway, but I would support the $100,000 figure.
Thank you, Dave. If I can follow up on that, Mr. Chair. If we ask for 100,000 and over the next 2 years, whatever, doesn't necessarily mean we absolutely have to spend if we can get our work done with 90,000 or 75 or 95. Isn't that the case?
Yes, that's true. Let me, if I can clarify this, Chase, it looks to me like we would be needing more than $75,000 if we did all the testing you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's going to depend on what you want to test for. You know, I think
if we do we're talking more like 120, 150, right?
Yeah, well, so yeah, if the 500 samples is just the, the 73,000. Let me just do this math here. 73,000 is based on just doing 500 samples of the comprehensive homeowners kit.
Right.
If we were to try to incorporate some PFAS into this, I think we would be in our best interest to reach out to townships. I think we should focus on those town halls and also make a request to the townships if they're willing to put forward some dollars to sample their own well at the town level. If they're not able to do that, I think the town halls are of particular interest to us because it is a well that we can go back to periodically to check and look for long-term trend analysis. So we would want to try to incorporate those wells. You're correct. If we start incorporating PFAS into this conversation, depending on the number of samples, our costs are going to be fluctuated. So if you rounded it off to 100,000, then we would adjust those dollars based on the number of PFAS samples we wanted. And then that would likely just subtract from the number of other private wells that we could sample with the program.
Right. And thank you. And I suggest we not today get too wrapped up on the exact dollar amount. It's nice to have a sense of what it's going to cost to do what kind of a program, but let's figure out what kind of a program we want to do and what the elements of it are. And then, we can, at our next meeting, we can come closer to what actual amount we're going to request. And I think this is an opportunity to do water testing, but it's also an opportunity to get some community engagement in the whole process. And you see, you have listed here 100 voluntary submitted samples. That would be homeowners who voluntarily pay for their samples to be submitted, or would we pay? No, they voluntarily have their well tested.
Those would be paid for out of this program, but it would be it would be less targeted than the other 400 samples.
Okay. And have you thought in terms of labor? I can see why you want our staff to have the control of the program. It makes a lot of sense. But is there any way that we could do the program so that, well, I mean, would it make sense to ask the towns to identify if they're interested, to identify a person who would go through some training and then would do the sampling in their town? If they're interested, I don't know, would that save any time, or would that be, is it best to keep it internally? Have you thought about any of those things? Or would it be worth approaching UW Stout and asking if they had any students that would take this on as a project, in which case we'd have at least again, a trained staff doing it, be a voluntary staff to be trained. Are those things possible to consider?
I can let Heather and Rob, or Heather and Jeff chime in here too. I mean, certainly we can consider those. I think all that is potential, and part of the quality control I think is important. Also from a county perspective, in trying to establish relationships with landowners in the county regarding this topic. It's important to kind of see a face with that, and not to say that we couldn't do that with volunteers as well, but making sure that the delivery of the results is consistent. I think we can accomplish that through voluntary approach too. So yeah, I think it's definitely something we should consider.
I see I can definitely see the argument. The point you just made is a valid point also. Any other questions?
This, Jeff, I was just going to add, I think it's just a balance between how much time do we have to spend training?
Yeah.
Just how much time is what that, we spend a lot of time in training. We could be spending it getting the samples. So it's just looking at that and how long that would take.
Just one further from Mike here. The comprehensive homeowners sample, I understand that. And then things like pharmaceuticals, personal care products are really testing to see if septic systems are polluting the water. So would that be a follow-up to if we had wells where we had high nitrates, for example? It wouldn't make sense to test all wells for that, would it? Pharmaceuticals, et cetera?
Correct. That's so a few years ago, we did a project with public health, and I kind of inherited it when I first started here, and that was kind of how they approached it. They did the initial round was basically just nitrates, and then they went through the initial nitrate samples and pulled 21, I think, wells that tested high above the state standard for nitrates, and ran the pharmaceuticals and personal care products samples. And that, like you said, septics, it tells you about septic loading. It doesn't necessarily give you the exact quantity. It's not going to tell you, yep, this is coming from your neighbor, but it gives you an idea of where the nitrates are coming from. But you are correct. It doesn't make much sense to do that test if somebody's testing zero in nitrates.
I would add to one thing that we failed to put on this sheet would be also more of an agricultural chemical follow-up test. Those are available too for a nominal fee. I believe it's around $200 some as well. So not just to target septic systems, but providing that opportunity or information to a landowner that did have elevated results for nitrate, for example, providing a resource that we can, that they can follow up and do a follow-up test. And whether that's actually paid for by this through these funds, or they would have to do that on their own, at least we have a point of communication with that.
Any other questions, comments? So the plan is to come back to our next, have this on the agenda for our next meeting again, and to try and hone in on more closely what the kind of program we want would cost, and provide a motion to the board for that purpose. Any final comments from committee members? Anything from staff? Any final comments?
I would just say that when we come back with this discussion at the next meeting, if there's strong feelings about the interest in PFAS, that's going to have a tremendous impact on what we do for the budget. But I think our intention would be to focus on the townships, the town halls, get a sample in every township for PFAS, and then depending on those results, we would have to reevaluate to further testing if necessary. Right now, as Heather mentioned earlier, we're not seeing obvious areas in the county where PFAS is a potential issue. And admittedly, Heather and I specifically we're not, we haven't been around here that long. So there is some historical perspective from the towns and the town boards that may lead us to certain areas of the county where, potentially that PFAS could be an issue. So at least we'll be getting, I think we would include in our proposal, 22 town halls or shops, wells to sample for, and that'll be reflected in that proposal, unless the committee would like us to do further testing on that somewhere else.
And just quickly, Chase, Chairman Bartlett's question about water quantity and testing for that. We do have those testing wells that are monitored. Is there any way that any of that can be incorporated into something like this?
I can let Heather expound on that. I mean, I think, she's going to be running that program here going forward. There is some immediate potential for maybe one new well, but that comes with an added cost. So, if we wanted to add more quantity, the Well-Intel program sampling in the county, we could include some sort of a proposal for what that would look like in this type of a budget. The interesting, or the one thing to consider with the Well-Intel program is it's typically long-term expenses, where quality monitoring, while that's long-term as well, it's a point in time where we're collecting a sample. And in order to set up a Well-Intel continuous monitoring program on some wells, we have to commit those funds a little bit more long-term, of which our current program is in our budget year after year to maintain that. But Heather, I'm sorry to interrupt or take that time, but please expound upon any of that.
Yeah, I guess I recently took over the Well-Intel program. I know Steve Olson came and kind of gave you folks a presentation last month, I think, on kind of the background of that program. I took it over. I'm kind of working on figuring out some of the stuff. I would like to possibly get another one of the long-term monitors out into the community, but I want to go through and kind of evaluate. There's some areas that we have them set up where they're kind of stacked to a certain extent. And so I kind of like to take a little time to look at where are the gaps, where should we be trying to make sure that we get that data. But I think something like that, we could have that data complement the data that we collect with the quality data as well. We could reach out to the folks that already have Well-Intel monitors in their wells and have them in this program as well to kind of see if there's any sort of fluctuation as their water levels fluctuate. I guess that's kind of my first thought, but like I said, I'm still kind of getting acclimated to the program and working with the data. But I do think the two things could complement one another fairly well.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments? All right. It's really helpful. We have more work to do to get this framed up, but this is exactly what we were looking for. Thanks a lot. With that,
Thank you.
we'll look forward to discussing it at our next meeting again. And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. And I see out my window that it's snowing like crazy out there. So